Naturally, Joey Costello was not at soccer practice or at school. I expected to hear something about Mike over the loudspeaker, but the only announcement they read was about reduced tickets to a carnival that's coming to Tangerine. No pray for Mike Costello or pray for Joey Costello. Miss Alvarez, though, wrote his address on the chalkboard and urged everyone who knows Joey to send a card to the family. A couple of guys at soccer practice were talking about the accident. They said that the principal of the high school, Mr. Bridges, husband of my language arts teacher, read an announcement. Mr. Bridges said the student council planned to do something special to honor Mike's memory. He didn't say what that something special was. It obviously wasn't canceling football practice. Mom and Dad are at each other's throats arguing about all of this. The football practice, the lightning, the kind of place we live in now. Mom is determined to call the parents of each and every football player, get them together, and have them refuse to send their sons to any more afternoon practices. Dad, apparently, is arguing the other side. Coach Warner now refers to Dad as one of his football fathers. Dad likes this, and I think he's afraid of doing anything that might mess up his status. Mom's reply was something like, "Dead boys don't kick footballs." Soccer practice was a colossal drag. We spent most of the time playing a pointless and goalless scrimmage game, the 6th and 7th graders versus the 8th graders. I hate games like that. The ball never gets near the goal. Two teams full of clueless toe stubbers kept kicking it back and forth at each other, never getting 20 yards past either side of midfield. The kid in the gray sweatshirt played goal for the 8th graders. He had a shutout going too. It's obvious to me that there are only a handful of real players on this team. Our side had Tommy and me. Their side had Gino and a couple of big guys playing fullback. Everybody else who got the ball just kicked it away in a panic. We have absolutely nobody at midfield. That's why the pointless, toe-stubbing battle continued to rage. There's no in-between on this team. We've got two great strikers in Tommy and Gino, one great goaltender in me, and a freezer full of dog meat. Maybe when Tommy and Gino get together on the front line, they can feed off each other. I sure hope so. While I was standing there in the goal, waiting for something to happen, my mind started to wander. I started thinking about Joey and what he must be going through. I wondered what I would be like in Joey's place. What if my brother had landed on the goal line with the left side of his hair singed off? What if Eric was the body at the Undertaker's right now? How would I feel about that? I would feel relieved. I would feel safer. But I would feel sorry, too. Eric is part of the eclipse story. I know he is. Eric is a part of whatever it is that I need to remember. I don't want Eric to die and take his part of the story with him. Thursday, September 7th. Mom began her telephone campaign at 9 a.m. She had a list of all the numbers in Lake Windsor Downs. She called everyone she knew of who had a son on the football team. After a few hours of this, she was interrupted by a call from Dad. The principal of Lake Windsor High School, Mr. Bridges, had called him. Mr. Bridges told Dad that he was getting complaints from parents about the afternoon football practices. Dad and Mr. Bridges arranged to have a meeting at our house tonight with Coach Warner and anyone else who wanted to come. Mom acted surprised, hung up, and then returned to her list and called back everyone who had expressed interest. She asked them all to meet at our house at 7:45. After dinner, I helped Mom arrange couches and extra chairs in the great room. Eric went out with Arthur. For a while, I could hear them racing up and down the perimeter road in the mud. Then they were gone. By 7:55, 12 parents had arrived. They sat in the great room with Dad and made small talk about the Japanese fish in our lake. Stuff like, are the koi disappearing from the lake? Are they dying? Is someone fishing in the lake at night? Could there be an alligator eating the koi? Mom answered the door at 8:05 to Mr. Bridges, a short round man in a blue suit, and Coach Warner, who was wearing a Lake Windsor high pullover. Mom showed them to a pair of chairs next to the fireplace, facing the crowd. She thanked them for coming, then took a seat next to Dad on the couch. Coach Warner sat down, but Mr. Bridges remained standing to speak. You probably know me. I'm Bud Bridges. I've been principal of Lake Windsor High since the doors opened here 10 years ago. And I have to share with you that this tragic accident is the worst thing that's happened to me as a principal. Mike Costello was a fine young man, a young man I'm proud to say I knew. His loss is a personal loss for me. Let's make sure he's the last one that we lose. Everyone in the room looked at Mum, who had startled them with this interruption. Mr. Bridges recovered quickly. Amen to that. I met with the student council officers today. They have decided to dedicate this year's senior awards night to Mike Costello and to plant a tree in his memory in our entranceway. Mum leaned forward. Mr. Bridges, can we count on you to stop these afternoon practices during thunderstorms? Mr. Bridges looked over at Coach Warner. I've discussed this with the coach, and I'll let him address that. Mr. Bridges sat down, but Coach Warner did not get up. He spoke quietly from his chair, directly to Mum. Ma'am, I also took Mike Costello's death personally. I knew Mike well. I knew him as a football player and as a leader. I know that Mike was dedicated to this team and would not want to see it destroyed because of a tragic accident. The coach cleared his throat. And that's really what you're talking about, ma'am, the destruction of this team. There really is no other time to practice, so we would be the team that did not practice. There are some boys who play for me, boys like Antoine Thomas, who are counting on football, and on this football season in particular, to get them into college. College is not going to happen for some of them without football. That's just a hard fact. I know some of you have the means to send your kids to college anyway. I'm just saying that not everybody is in that situation. Mum remained hunched over. We're not saying don't practice. We're saying don't practice when lightning might strike and kill a player. Ma'am, there has never been another boy injured by lightning in our program, and we've been practicing in the same place at the same time for 10 years now. It was an accident, a tragic accident. Somebody gets killed in their car out on the highway. It's tragic, and we mourn the loss of that person, but we don't stop all traffic from ever using the highway again. We don't close it down. We recognize it as an accident. Mum sat upright. She pulled a small black notebook out of her pocket. Coach Warner, you may be interested in this information. This is from the Tangerine Times, August 1st. Tangerine County is the lightning strike capital of the United States. More people are killed by lightning in Tangerine County per year than in any other county in America. That's not any other county in Florida, Coach. That's any other county in America. And there have indeed been other football players killed. One at Tangerine High and one at St. Anthony's High. A cross-country runner was killed 2 years ago by lightning. A sophomore from Lake Windsor High was killed stepping off of her school bus last year. Being struck by lightning is one of the top causes of accidental death in this area. Coach Warner looked down like he was thinking. When he looked back up at Mum, he seemed to have made up his mind. Ma'am, if you decide to remove your son from the football program based on that information, I will understand. He can turn in his playbook and uniform to me or to one of my assistant coaches. I looked at Dad, sitting back on the couch next to Mum. His whole body was stiff, rigid, like he was dead. What would he do? Would he publicly take Coach Warner's side against Mom? Or would he defend her and anger Eric's coach? I would not find out the answer to these questions because it was Mom who spoke up. She was not ready to give up either. Mom was not ready to pull the plug on the Eric Fisher football dream that drove our lives. Why can't you hold your practices in the morning for the safety of all? I understand that these boys and you coaches and we parents are all dedicated. We can dedicate ourselves to getting the boys to the football field at 6:30. That way they can practice for an hour, take showers, and be ready for class at 8. Coach Warner replied slowly, Man, I can't ask these players and their parents to give up their sleep, to disrupt their lives, to come out to practice football at 6:30. He paused to collect his thoughts. We have kids who can only get to school by bus. Those kids could no longer make practice. Again, this is about doing the right thing for everybody involved. Not all of my players have parents at home with cars who don't need to be at work themselves by 6:30 in the morning. Mum was angry now. She pointed her black notebook at him. You seem to want to make this a rich versus poor, or a have versus have-not issue, don't you? But a bolt of lightning is not aware of a kid's income before it hits him. That's what we're talking about here, if you'd care to listen. We're talking about kids placed in harm's way every day because of when you schedule your practice. Coach Warner looked down again. He wasn't going to budge. Mr. Bridges was looking more and more nervous. Arthur Bauer's father said, to no one in particular, "It's the same thing with soldiers. They got to train in all kinds of weather, so they'll be ready for anything." A long and tense silence followed. It was broken when a large man, larger than Coach Warner, stood up. He had a reddish-gray crew cut and a big head and neck like a football player's. When he spoke, though, it was with a surprisingly high voice. "I'm Bill Donnelly. My son Terry and I live at 6200 Kew Gardens Drive. Some of you may know my house, or know about it. It's the one that's been struck by lightning 3 times. Each time, it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. My son plays football at Lake Windsor High, and I'm very proud of that, but I have to agree with Mrs. Fisher. We live in an area where this lightning strike stuff is a reality." He stopped and addressed the coach directly. "I'm willing to drive my son to practice at 4 o'clock in the morning if I have to, and I'll take part in any kind of carpool we set up to make sure that every kid can get there." He turned then and looked right at Mum. "I can't sell my house because of this lightning thing. I can't get an insurance agent to write me a homeowner's policy. But I don't really care about any of that. I care about my son and what might happen to him. I can't even imagine what Jack Costello and his wife are going through tonight." Mr. Donnelly sat down, and the rest of the room finally came to life. Other parents leaned over to Mom to tell her that they'd take part in a carpool as well. Mr. Bridges stood up to speak. He had to wait until the talking died down. "Well, all right. I think that's a good suggestion. What we can do now is present this suggestion to all of the parents. We can contact the parent or guardian of each player and ask them to respond to the question, should we move practice to the early morning? Coach, does that work for you?" Coach Warner was quick to agree. "Of course, we can try that. Me and my staff are certainly willing. We'll ask that all the parents, and if the majority want to do that, then that's what we'll do." He paused to look at Mum. "Personally, I'd prefer another solution." Mum replied immediately, "Which is?" "Which is that we continue to practice in the afternoon, but we call a halt to it whenever there's lightning in the area." "That's every day, Coach. Every day at 4 o'clock. "No, it is not every day. At this time of the season, we might have rain every day. We might have rain during some of our games, too. But that does not mean that there is lightning striking in the area every day." The coach stopped, and no one else spoke. Mr. Bridges took the opportunity to sum up the meeting. "Then we're all agreed on this course of action. We need to present this suggestion to the parents of all the players. If the majority want to move practice to the morning, we'll work together to solve the transportation problems that some boys might have." People around the room started mumbling, and the meeting broke up. Mum thanked Mr. Bridges and Coach Warner for coming. They exited quickly. Other parents lingered for a short time, thanking Mum. Mum made a point of thanking Mr. Donnelly, right in front of Dad, for speaking up in support of our children. Dad pretended to be saying goodbye to somebody else, but I'm sure he heard. By 8:30, the house was empty of guests. Mum, Dad, and I worked silently to restore the furniture and straighten up the great room. Mum headed upstairs first. She said goodnight to me, but she pointedly ignored Dad. When I went upstairs, he was standing alone by the fireplace, staring at the spot where Coach Warner had been sitting.